long shadows across the sprawling campus of the Galactic Xenobiology Institute, nestled in the Swiss Alps, where Earth's first interstellar university had been established after first contact. Dr. Zara Vexhai adjusted her crystalline teaching apparatus as students filed into lecture hall Omega beings from 47 different worlds, each more exotic than the last dot. The Manthari clicked their razor-sharp mandibles in anticipation. The silicon-based Quartzians hummed at frequencies that made the windows vibrate. 3-meter-tall Gorvani warriors ducked through doorways, their battle-scarred hides telling stories of 1,000 conflicts. And tucked away in the back corner, almost invisible among the giants and monsters, sat David Chun. "Welcome to lethal xenobiology," Dr. Vexhai announced, her voice carrying through the universal translator with practiced authority. Her species, the Velkari, were renowned throughout the galaxy as scholars. Their 4 eyes could perceive across 17 different spectrums, making them ideal observers of deadly phenomena. This semester, we'll study the most dangerous creatures the galaxy has ever produced. A ripple of excitement passed through the diverse crowd. Combat-hardened veterans leaned forward. Warrior scholars from militant species cracked their knuckles. Everyone knew the legends, the species so lethal they'd been wiped out by galactic intervention, or had destroyed themselves through their own violence. David Chun pulled out a simple paper notebook, an archaic writing method that drew amused glances from his classmates, who used quantum processing data tablets. He clicked his primitive ballpoint pen and waited, brown eyes alert behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Let me begin with a question," Dr. Vexhai continued, manipulating her holographic display to show a star map dotted with red zones. "What makes a species truly dangerous? Is it size? Speed? Venom potency? Krafger, a mountain of muscle, and chitinous armor from the warrior world of Blackstar raised one of his 4 arms. Raw-killing power, Professor. Teeth, claws, strength, the ability to tear apart enemies." Several students nodded agreement. Dr. Vexhai's expression suggested they were missing something crucial. "Interesting theory. What about you, Mr. Chun? You've been unusually quiet." All eyes turned to the small human in the back. David looked up from his notebook, considered the question with surprising gravity for someone barely 1.5 meters tall. "I'd say the most dangerous species is the one you underestimate, Professor. The one that looks harmless." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Several alien students exchanged glances. Was this tiny creature making a joke? A Gorvani let out what might have been laughter, a sound like grinding stone. Dr. Vexhai's 4 eyes focused intently on David. Something in his tone had caught her attention. "Elaborate, please." "Well," David said, still in that same casual tone, "throughout history, the apex predators that lasted longest weren't necessarily the biggest or strongest. They were the patient ones, the ones that planned, the ones that made their prey feel safe right up until the end." The temperature in the room seemed to drop a few degrees. Dr. Vexhai found herself studying this human student with new interest. His academic records showed he was from Earth, a recently contacted world classified as developing and non-threatening by the Galactic Council. "An intriguing perspective, Mr. Chun. I look forward to seeing how your views evolve as we examine history's true monsters." She turned back to her display. "Today, we begin with the Void Hunters of Proxima Centauri pack predators, capable of surviving in hard vacuum, responsible for the extinction of 6 different civilizations before they mysteriously vanished 3,000 years ago." As Dr. Vexhai began her lecture, David Chun continued taking notes in his primitive notebook, occasionally nodding as if recognizing familiar concepts. None of his classmates noticed that he never seemed surprised by any of the horrific details, only interested in the technical specifications. If they had looked more carefully at his notes, they might have wondered why he was writing things like countermeasures, and tactical assessments, rather than simple observations about alien biology, not asterisk 3. Weeks into the semester, the Galactic Xenobiology Institute had settled into a routine of fascinated horror. Each Tuesday and Thursday, Dr. Vexhai would unveil another nightmare from the galaxy's dark past, and her students would scribble notes about creatures that could end worlds. Today's subject made even the battle-hardened Gorvani shift uncomfortably in their reinforced seats. The crystalline shriekers, Dr. Vexhai announced as a holographic image materialized, a writhing mass of living crystal that seemed to bend light around itself. Native to the Sigma Draconis system, these beings weaponized sound itself. They could produce frequencies that would shatter molecular bonds at the cellular level. A collective shudder ran through the class. Zefki, a graceful aquatic being from the ocean world of Tethys Prime, raised a tentacle. How did they hunt, Professor? Surely such power would be indiscriminate? Excellent question. The Shriekers were highly intelligent pack hunters. They would coordinate their attacks, using harmonic resonance to literally vibrate their prey apart from the inside out. Entire cities would collapse when a pack decided to hunt. Dr. Vexhai manipulated the hologram to show wave patterns. There. Acoustic attacks could penetrate any known shielding technology of their era. From the back of the room came a familiar voice. What was their reaction time? Dr. Vexhai paused. Over the past 3 weeks, David Chun had asked increasingly specific questions, always focused on seemingly minor tactical details. I'm sorry? Their reaction time, David repeated, looking up from his notebook. From detecting a threat to producing their killing frequency. Was it instantaneous, or was there a delay? Several students turned to stare at the human. Crafter's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. What does reaction time matter against such power? Little soft skin? David's expression remained mild, but something flickered in his brown eyes. Well, if there was a delay, even half a second, it would create a window of vulnerability. A patient hunter could exploit that. The room went quiet again. Dr. Vexhai found herself accessing her research files. The records indicate APPROXIMATELY 0.7 seconds from threat detection to full acoustic deployment, but I failed to see how that's relevant. What could possibly move fast enough to a projectile? David said simply. Something launched before entering their detection range. High velocity, ballistic trajectory. They'd never have time to respond. The silence stretched longer this time. Dr. Vexhai's 4 eyes studied David with growing unease. That's surprisingly tactical thinking, Mr. Chun. Have you studied military applications? Just curious about practical problems, David replied, returning to his notes. You mentioned they went extinct. How exactly did that happen? Dr. Vexhai hesitated. The official records were classified, but the outline was public knowledge. A systematic extermination campaign approximately 2 millennia ago. The perpetrators were never identified. David murmured, making another note. Systematic. That suggests planning. Intelligence gathering. Someone who understood their weaknesses. After class, as students filed out discussing the horrific power of the Shriekers, several noticed that David Chun remained behind, apparently cross-referencing something in his notebook with his tablet. If they had looked over his shoulder, they would have seen star charts marking the locations of extinct dangerous species. Dr. Vexhai noticed too. As the last student left, she approached David's desk. Mr. Chun, might I ask what you're researching? David looked up with that same mild expression. Just trying to understand the bigger picture, Professor. It's interesting how many of these unstoppable species seem to have met very similar fates. Similar how? Systematic elimination. Precise targeting of weaknesses. Almost like someone was cleaning house. David closed his notebook, and gathered his primitive writing materials. "See you Thursday, Professor. I'm looking forward to learning about the hive mind swarmers." As David walked away, Dr. Vexhai felt a chill that had nothing to do with the alpine air conditioning. She made a mental note to review David Chun's admission records more carefully. That evening, in his modest apartment overlooking Lake Geneva, David Chun opened a secure communication channel to a location that wasn't listed on any galactic registry. "Status report," came a voice through the encrypted link. "Proceeding as planned," David replied quietly. The intelligence briefings were accurate. "They really don't understand what makes a species dangerous. Any concerns?" David glanced at his notebook filled with tactical assessments and vulnerability analyses. "None yet, though I think the professor is starting to suspect something. Requesting permission to accelerate the timeline. Granted. How much longer do you need?" 2 more weeks should be sufficient for a complete assessment." David closed the channel and returned to his notes, updating files on 46 species that the galaxy considered the ultimate predators. Asterisk. None of them had ever encountered humans. The Galactic Xenobiology Institute's archives hummed with activity in the pre-dawn hours. Dr. Zara Vishai moved through the restricted sections with growing unease, her 4 eyes scanning classified documents. That painted an increasingly disturbing picture. Every extinct ultimate predator species they'd studied showed the same pattern: systematic elimination, precise exploitation of biological weaknesses, and complete obliteration within remarkably short time frames. More troubling still, the extinction events had accelerated dramatically over the past 5 centuries. "Computer, cross-reference elimination patterns with galactic contact timelines," she whispered to the archive's eye. The results made her blood run cold. Meanwhile, in Lecture Hall Omega, David Shun arrived early as always, settling into his back row seat with his notebook and primitive pen. Today's subject was one he'd been particularly looking forward to: the hive mind. Swarmers of Kepler-442b. Other students filtered in, the usual collection of the galaxy's warrior races and scholarly species. But today, David noticed several new faces, beings he recognized as intelligence operatives from various governments. Word was spreading about the strange human student with his uncomfortable questions. Dr. Vexhai entered looking haggard. Her usual composure cracked. She activated the holographic display without her customary greeting, revealing a writhing mass of insectoid creatures that moved with terrifying coordination. "The hive mind swarmers," she began, her voice tighter than usual. 50 billion individual organisms sharing a collective consciousness. They could strip a planet bare in hours, their combined intelligence solving any tactical problem instantly. Krathker leaned forward, fascinated. What could possibly stop such a force? "Unknown," Dr. Vexhai replied, but her eyes found David in the back row. "Their extinction remains one of our greatest mysteries." David raised his hand. "Professor, how did their collective consciousness handle contradictory information?" The question landed like a physical blow. Dr. Vexhai's composure cracked further. "What do you mean?" "Well, if you fed the hive mind conflicting data simultaneously, say, through captured individuals, would it create processing conflicts? Psychological warfare on a species-wide scale?" The room went dead silent. Several of the intelligence operatives were now openly staring at David, who remained slouched in his chair, pen poised over his notebook as if he'd asked about the weather. "Doctor." Vexhai's voice came out as a whisper. "That would be ... theoretically possible. The recorded extinction event did show signs of mass confusion before the final collapse." "Interesting," David murmured, making notes. "So you could essentially hack an entire species by exploiting their greatest strength, their unity." Agent Krell of Centauri Intelligence stood abruptly. "Human, what is your interest in these specific tactical details?" David looked up with those same mild brown eyes. I'm a xenobiology student, Agent Krell. I study how species survive or fail. Understanding extinction patterns helps us avoid repeating them. You know my designation, Krell said slowly. Your species has very distinctive pheromone signatures, David replied. Plus, you're carrying a Centauri plasma disruptor in your left sleeve. The power cell hum is barely audible, but humans have pretty good hearing. The tension in the room ratcheted up several degrees. Dr. Vexhai realized her worst fears were being confirmed. Mr. Chun, she said carefully, perhaps you could share what you've concluded from our lesson so far. David closed his notebook and stood, suddenly commanding attention despite his unremarkable appearance. I've learned that this galaxy has a very interesting definition of dangerous. You focus on size, speed, exotic abilities, the flashy stuff, but you've missed the real pattern, which is every ultimate predator you've shown me had the same fatal flaw. They were adapted for a specific type of warfare. The Void Hunters were ambush predators. The Shriekers relied on overwhelming force. The Swarmers trusted their collective intelligence. David's voice carried a new edge. But none of them adapted to face an enemy that was adaptable. The holographic display flickered as Dr. Vexhai's hands trembled on the controls. Adaptable how? An enemy that studies its targets for generations. That learns their weaknesses, their psychology, their entire way of thinking. That doesn't attack until it knows exactly how to win. David picked up his primitive notebook. An enemy that looks harmless until the moment it strikes. Agent Krell's hand was now openly resting on his weapon. Human, state your credentials. David smiled for the first time all semester. It wasn't a pleasant expression. David Chun, Xenobiology. Graduate student. Also Captain David Chun, Human Colonial Marines, Intelligence Division. He paused. Also the advanced scout for a species you've classified as developing and non-threatening. The implications hit the room like a shockwave. Dr. Vexhai felt the pieces clicking into place with horrible clarity. You've been here for 6 months, she whispered. Actually, humans have been observing this galaxy for much longer than that, Professor. We're very patient hunters. David headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Dr. Vexhai? You might want to check the extinction timeline for those ultimate predators against human deep space exploration records. The correlation is ... illuminating. As alarms began blaring throughout the Institute, David Chun walked calmly toward the exit, leaving behind a room full of the galaxy's most dangerous species, suddenly realizing they might not be apex predators after all. Asterisk. The emergency lockdown sirens wailed across the galactic xenobiology Institute as security forces converged on lecture. Hall Omega. Agent Krell barked orders into his communicator, while Dr. Vexhai frantically accessed the restricted files she'd been studying all night. But David Chun was already gone. How? Krell snarled, his plasma weapon trained on the empty doorway. I had eyes on him. Dr. Vexhai's 4 eyes were scanning multiple data streams simultaneously. Agent Krell, I need you to see this. Her voice carried a tremor of genuine terror. The extinction patterns. They correspond exactly with human space exploration logs. On the holographic display, star maps showed the progression of humanity's peaceful expansion across the galaxy over the past 3 centuries. Overlaid in red were the locations where ultimate predator species had mysteriously vanished. Correlation was perfect. Impossible, breathed Zefke, her aquatic features pale with shock. Humans are classified as barely space-capable. They've only achieved faster-than-light travel recently, according to their official first contact. Reports, Dr. Vexhai corrected grimly. But what if those reports were deliberately modest? Meanwhile, David moved through the Institute's service tunnels with practiced ease. The building schematics had been memorized months ago, along with security protocols, staff schedules, and emergency procedures. Standard reconnaissance for any intelligence operation. His earpiece crackled with an encrypted transmission. Mongoose, this is Den Mother. Your cover is blown. Requesting immediate extraction. Negative, Den Mother, David whispered as he emerged into the Institute's vast library. Mission parameters have changed. Need to accelerate the demonstration phase. Explain. They're starting to connect the dots. Time to show them what happens when humans stop being polite. Above him, the Institute's most dangerous students were being mobilized for a manhunt. Krathgur species were legendary trackers. The silicon-based Quartzians could detect minute chemical traces. 3 different warrior races with enhanced senses and centuries of combat experience. They were hunting the most dangerous predator in galactic history, and they didn't even know it. David accessed the Institute's specimen containment facility through a maintenance terminal. His fingers moved across the interface with surprising speed, bypassing security protocols that should have taken experts hours to crack. Computer, display current containment inventory. The list that appeared made him smile grimly. 17. Different species of moderately dangerous creatures, kept for research purposes. Not the galaxy-ending monsters from the lectures, but still deadly enough to cause considerable chaos. Perfect for a distraction. In the security center, alarms suddenly blazed red as containment breach warnings flooded the screens. Impossible! Agent Krell stared at the displays in disbelief. Those systems are quantum encrypted. Dr. Vexhai was no longer paying attention to the security alerts. She was deep in the classified archives, following a trail of evidence that painted an increasingly terrifying picture. Human merchant vessels appearing in systems just months before apex predator extinctions. Scientific expeditions that happened to visit worlds where dangerous species conveniently destroyed themselves through internal conflicts. And always, human observers taking detailed notes about the fascinating, self-destructive behaviors of violent species. Agent Krell, she called out, her voice barely steady. You need to see this. Humans haven't been randomly studying dangerous species. They've been systematically curating them. What do you mean? Every species extinction followed the same pattern. Careful observation, identification of critical weaknesses, then precise intervention disguised as natural causes or internal conflicts. Dr. Vexhai's display showed a timeline that stretched back 5 centuries. They've been managing the galaxy's predator population. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't recently achieved space travel. They'd been secretly operating throughout the galaxy for centuries, methodically eliminating any species they deemed too dangerous to coexist with. Down in the specimen lab, containment fields flickered and died as David completed his work. 17 different species of moderately lethal creatures suddenly found themselves free in a building full of the galaxy's warrior races. But David wasn't finished. He accessed the Institute's communication array and began broadcasting on frequencies that would reach intelligence services across known space. Attention Galactic Intelligence Networks. His voice carried across the void with deliberate calm. This is Captain David Shun, Human Colonial Marines. Consider this a formal notification that humanity's probationary observation period is now concluded. In the security center, Agent Krell nearly dropped his weapon. Probationary period? Dr. Vexhai's 4 eyes went wide as the final pieces fell into place. They've been testing us. The whole time, they've been testing whether the galaxy's species could coexist peacefully. David's broadcast continued. For the past 3 centuries, humanity has been conducting behavioral assessments of galactic civilization. Species demonstrating excessive aggression toward other spacefaring races have been managed. This process will now transition from covert to overt operations. Through the Institute's corridors, the sounds of chaos echoed as students and security forces encountered the freed specimens. But David wasn't concerned. He'd studied every species in the building, knew their capabilities, their limitations, their fears. Humans were very good at turning strengths into weaknesses. One final note, David's voice carried across the galaxy. Humanity would like to formally apply for membership in the Galactic Council. We believe we have demonstrated our commitment to maintaining peace and stability. As alarms blared and creatures roared through the halls of the Institute, David Chun walked calmly toward the exit, past security forces too busy with the chaos to notice one unremarkable human. The galaxy's ultimate predator was finally stepping out of the shadows. 3 hours after the containment breach, the Galactic Xenobiology Institute resembled a war zone. Emergency response teams had finally contained the 17 escaped specimens, but not before they demonstrated exactly why humans classified them as moderately dangerous. The casualty count would have been devastating if not for the suspiciously well-coordinated evacuation procedures that someone had quietly activated just minutes before the breakout. Dr. Vex High stood in the ruins of her lecture hall, surrounded by intelligence operatives from 12 worlds, all trying to process the implications of humanity's revelation. On the main display, David Chun's image stared back at them, no longer the mild-mannered graduate student, but a predator who had spent months studying them with the patience of a species that had turned waiting into an art form. Agent Krell was coordinating response efforts, but his usual confidence had evaporated. How long? He demanded of Dr. Vex High. How long have they been among us? The earliest evidence I can find suggests at least 5 centuries, she replied, her voice hollow. Possibly longer. They've been incredibly careful to maintain the illusion of being a newly space-capable species. But why? Zefki had been injured during the chaos, nothing serious, but enough to remind everyone that David had orchestrated events to be chaotic but not lethal. If they're as dangerous as you suggest, why the deception? Dr. Vex High pulled up the final piece of evidence she'd uncovered, a classified report that painted humanity's true nature in stark relief. Because they're not just predators. They're shepherds. The holographic display showed species extinction patterns across the galaxy over the past millennium. The acceleration of apex predator extinctions directly correlated with humanity's secret expansion into space. But there was another pattern, a dramatic decrease in interspecies warfare, resource conflicts, and genocidal campaigns. They've been protecting us, Dr. Vex High continued, from ourselves and from species too dangerous to allow continued existence. Every ultimate predator we studied, humanity eliminated them to keep the galaxy safe for peaceful species. The implications were staggering. The Galactic Council's entire understanding of cosmic power balance was built on a lie. The peaceful coexistence they'd achieved wasn't through diplomatic progress. It was because humanity had been quietly removing the worst actors from the galactic stage. A new communication came through the Institute's systems. David Chun's face appeared on screen, but now he was wearing military insignia and standing in what was clearly a human military facility. "Greetings, representatives of the Galactic Council," David began. "I believe some explanations are in order." Agent Krell stepped forward. "Human, you will surrender yourself for—" "Agent Krell," David interrupted gently, "I appreciate your dedication to duty, but you might want to check your long-range sensors." The silence that followed was deafening. On screens throughout the Institute, tactical displays showed the impossible. Human ships materializing throughout the galaxy, dropping stealth systems that had hidden them for centuries. Not just a few vessels, hundreds of thousands, positioned at strategic points around every major world and trade route. Humanity hadn't been hiding their space capability. They'd been hiding their dominance of it. For 5 centuries, David continued. Humanity has served as the galaxy's immune system. We've eliminated species that posed existential threats to peaceful civilization. The void hunters, the crystalline. Shriekers, the hive mind swarmers, all removed not through military conquest, but through careful study and precise intervention. Dr. Vex-High found her voice. The systematic elimination patterns, you made it look like natural extinction events. Correct. We learned early that direct military intervention creates murders and revenge cycles. It's much more effective, too. Encourage dangerous species to destroy themselves through their own aggressive tendencies. David's expression remained calm, almost gentle. Psychology is often more effective than firepower. But why reveal yourselves now? Zefki asked. Because the galaxy has matured, David replied. Species are learning to cooperate rather than dominate. Trade has replaced conquest. Diplomacy has replaced warfare. After 5 centuries of careful management, we believe galactic civilization is ready to know the truth. The weight of revelation settled over the room. Every major diplomatic breakthrough, every peace treaty, every reduction in interspecies violence, all of it had been guided by an invisible hand that turned conflict resolution into a science. What happens now? Agent Krell asked quietly. Now, humanity formally requests to join the Galactic Council, David said. Not as observers or junior members, but as equal partners in maintaining the peace we've all worked to achieve. And if the Council refuses? David's smile was gentle but carried. An edge that made everyone in the room remember exactly what species they were dealing with. Agent Krell, in 5 centuries of covert operations, has humanity ever failed to achieve its objectives? The question hung in the air like a challenge and a promise. The galaxy's most dangerous predator was offering partnership, but the alternative was clearly remaining prey. Dr. Vex-High realized she was witnessing the most important moment in galactic history. Humanity had spent 5 centuries proving they could eliminate any threat to peaceful civilization. Now they were offering to do it openly, as allies rather than shadowy guardians. Welcome to the adult table, David concluded. We have much work to do. As communication ended and the implications sank in, one thought echoed through every mind in the room. They had been teaching about the deadliest species in the galaxy, never realizing that the most dangerous one had been taking notes. In the back row, all along, Asterisk